All right, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll call the roll just to make sure we have a quorum. Vice President Houston,
Here.
Treasurer Alvarez, not here. Uh, Secretary Gray,
Here.
here. Immediate past President Williams, not here. And myself, President Deere. So we have three members of the board here. We have a quorum. So the meeting is in order. Is there any public comments?
I don't believe we have any public comments registered on our system, but allow me to open up for members of the public who may be on the platform to acknowledge and raise their hand if they'd like to make a public comment. Okay, seeing no hands raised, I believe we have no public comments, President Deere, but if I may make a comment of my own.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I just would like to just wish everyone a happy Pride Month here for the month of June. It's an important heritage celebration of an important community of our service territory, but it's also important for us to highlight, the cultural diversity that exists within the LA region, and just being able to embrace that diversity and the important constituents that we serve. So happy to know that we are acknowledging that in our district with our social media post, celebrating with our LGBTQ community, and glad to give that short acknowledgement today. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to you, President Deere.
All right, thank you. If there's no further public comment, we'll go to item 4A, discussion items, Colorado River salinity and supply issues.
Okay, thank you for that, Director Deere. And I believe we have our colleagues from Metropolitan Water District to provide a presentation on both items A and B. And so I'll turn it over to Shanti Rosette. But before we do, I just would like to check to know if we have General Manager Adele Hashkhalil present. If so, if you would like to make any remarks before we get started.
Greg, this is Shane Chapman. Unfortunately, Adele's not able to join us today, but he sends his regards.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll just make a comment of my own that it's great to have you here today to provide these presentations, especially as we look at the conditions on the Colorado River Aqueduct. I know a lot of the focus has been on the state water project and the shortages there, in particular the 6 agencies that are dependent on the state water project supply. But we also, need to keep our eye on the Colorado River Aqueduct, as it also has some constraints on conditions as well. And I'm happy that you're here to provide, a readout on how that's shaping up. So with that said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Shane, and to your team.
And before you go further, Greg, if I could ask everybody to mute their microphones if they're not speaking at this time. We're getting a little bit of feedback for the recording. If you could just mute, and then when you're ready to speak, to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And I do see a hand is raised.
That was me, Greg.
That was you. Okay. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Shanti, go ahead. Let's dive right into it.
Great. I am going to share my screen. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Colorado River salinity and supply issues. There was good news recently when the Bureau of Reclamation announced that it was resuming its Paradox Valley unit operations for a 6-month test period at a 2/3 capacity. The Paradox Valley Deep Injection Well is the largest salinity project that we have in the Colorado River Basin. The injection test results will inform well conditions, and full operations may resume based on an evaluation of those test results. The Paradox Valley unit had been shut down because of a number of earthquakes that were potentially attributed to it. And this is an image of where the Paradox Valley deep injection well is located. It is successful in removing 95,000 tons of salinity from the Colorado River supply. It's a tributary to the Colorado River, the Dolores River. And this is will improve Colorado River salinity eventually. However, because of our low hydrology over the last few years, unfortunately, the salinity is expected to increase next year. And now I'll transition to talking about some of the supply issues. We have been gearing up in the Colorado River for the expiration of a number of important sets of operating rules for operation of the Colorado River system. Most importantly, the 2007 interim guidelines, the drought contingency plans, and various state agreements that were set up to implement both the guidelines and the DCPs, as well as Treaty Minute 323. Lake Mead, which is operated under these rules, is very important to Metropolitan. It's a vital storage space. Lake Mead is a place where Metropolitan's conservation and our storage efforts meet. Metropolitan has developed and funded extensive conservation of Colorado River water in California that is conserved as intentionally created surplus, and that water can be stored in Lake Mead, which has benefited the reservoir elevations and also provided an important source of supply that can be taken in years like this. It is a vital source for us actually this year. Unfortunately, when looking ahead, the risks to the Colorado River reservoirs have increased significantly since the 2007 interim guidelines were adopted. There has been declining snowpack. The current 30-year average is 11% lower than the previous 30-year average. Runoff efficiency is significantly reduced from what it was historically. For example, in 2021, snowpack was relatively close to normal, 89%. However, the runoff was only 32%. This has resulted in lower reservoir elevations. Both Lake Powell and Lake Mead are at historically low levels. They're at their lowest levels since they were filled, all of which leads to the potential risk of reduced delivery of water. And particularly for Metropolitan, that risk could come with an inability to take our intentionally created surplus within a couple of years. Given that Lake Powell had declined to its lowest level since it was filled this year, and it reached an elevation that was identified as a target elevation to protect their minimum power pool, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, along with the upper basin states in the Colorado River, announced a joint action to prop up the level of Lake Powell and protect that reservoir's infrastructure by both releasing additional water from upstream reservoirs and reducing the scheduled release from Lake Powell to Glen Canyon. And that looks like it's going to keep Lake Powell above those critical reservoir elevations for the next 2 years. However, it will further reduce the level of Lake Powell, which is the reservoir that Metropolitan gets its water from. And earlier in December of last year, the lower basin states and reclamation had entered into an agreement to protect the elevations of Lake Mead over the next couple of years. It was called the 500+ plan, and it is designed to add or retain 500,000 acre feet of water to Lake Mead in both 2022 and 2023. And Metropolitan had entered into the 500+ plan for California. This chart shows the elevation of Lake Mead, and I think that it's important to see this to understand the risk to our most important reservoir in the lower basin. In January of 2020, at the beginning of the chart, you can see that Lake Mead started at over 1,090 feet. And just for reference, this is before any of the shortage or mandatory storage triggers kick in. And then in the solid blue line is the actual historic elevation. We've reached the first shortage trigger and dropped below the second shortage trigger in less than a year. So there's been a pretty steep decline, even while we're taking these actions to protect the reservoir elevations. The runoff into the system has been so low that we've had trouble keeping up with it. And as you can see, this is a projection that's put together by the Bureau of Reclamation. And it was before the action was taken to reduce the release to Lake Mead. And so the actual reservoir elevations that will be projected in the future are going to be even lower than what's projected here. But as you can see, within less than 2 years, we're into the third level of shortage condition. And most significantly for us, that's only 65 feet above dead pool. And unfortunately, this chart is showing a pretty rosy scenario. It's based on average hydrology and average runoff. And as I mentioned before, we haven't been seeing either in the past. If we have a drier winters over the next 2 years and reduced runoff as we have had, as we've been seeing over the last 3 years, those elevations are going to go down even further without further intervention. So it probably won't surprise you at this point that the warning lights are already flashing. There are consultation provisions in most of the important operating documents for the Colorado River system, and we're at or near all of them. It's 1030 in the drought contingency plan, 1025 in the 2007 interim guidelines, and 1045 in Treaty Minute 323. So basin-wide collaboration going forward in light of these reservoir conditions and the potential for the impact to supply is essential. The 7 Colorado River Basin states and federal government agreed to the drought contingency plan in 2019, which was also intended to protect those critical reservoir elevations. And it is an important example of the basin-wide collaboration that's going to be needed in the drier future. And as I mentioned, we may be called upon to do more in the very near future. We may not have an opportunity to wait until the end of the guidelines in 2026, as had originally been anticipated. And we may all be called on in the basin to make significant cuts in our Colorado River uses. And it's possible that those cuts will not be short-term. They may be more permanent. So this is just something that we should be aware is a possibility in the future. So sorry for the bad news, but it's important to know the situation that we're facing. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, Shanti, that's a really important message that you're sharing with us. And I certainly didn't mean to steal any of the thunder that you presented. And I think you've, illustrated the concerns in a very stark and compelling manner. I don't have a particular question. Maybe the question is, what would be the best action that we can do here locally that perhaps you would recommend? I see Anatole on my screen here from City of Long Beach. Of course, we're here from West Basin. We may have a number of other folks from LA Department of Water and Power and other water agencies here. And so perhaps this could be a little bit of a pep talk and a pep rally to help us prepare to respond to these, urgent conditions.
Thank you. I think that within the metropolitan family, we're going to have to look for our opportunities to partner. And Shane is on the call. Our following agreement in PVID is going to be essential going forward. The land that we own in PVID may become a more important resource than it's ever been before. We may have to look for new opportunities to partner with other water users in the state. And the situation in the Colorado River has the potential to lead to more action that might be needed to be taken with respect to the allocation. And that's something that is another risk factor there. So we, within the metropolitan staff, are looking at all of our options. We do have options to assure that we'll be able to get our full Colorado River supply, but it's going to be much more challenging than it has been in the past.
So is Metropolitan working towards putting more supply into storage in preparation for the picture that you're painting here today?
We have had the ability to store a large amount of water in Lake Mead up until this year, over 1 million acre feet. Unfortunately, because of the historically low state water project allocation, we're having to draw down a significant part of that, potentially over 200,000 acre feet. But our practice has been to store water in Lake Mead when it's an option. And we have been very successful in doing that.
Okay, and I guess in the interest of collaboration and partnering, what we've done here in West Basin is to declare a level 3 shortage back in November of last year. And with the recent announcements at the state level with your agency, with the Met District, as well as with the mayor and the city of Los Angeles, we're working urgently with our municipalities to take up the call to reduce watering to 2 days a week across our entire service territory. We're not, categorized as the state water project dependent areas, but we see this as an opportunity to extend the messaging across our entire service territory, from Malibu, Topanga, all the way down to the Palos Verdes Peninsula, and leverage the messaging that you're doing, the messaging that DWP is doing, to extend that, across all of our customers in West Basin. And, given everything you're painting here, it seems like that's the right thing to do, because the conditions on the Colorado River doesn't provide us much hope that we have better conditions persisting for us.
Your leadership in taking those actions is very helpful for us in the basin as well, because in addition to the benefits of for our supply. It helps to demonstrate that Metropolitan is taking this seriously and is taking the lead on reducing uses throughout its service area, which helps create an environment where other water users are more willing to take reduced amounts of water as well. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
No, thank you. Not to take up all the airtime here, do want to allow for others to maybe ask questions. And while maybe some folks are thinking about the questions I'd like to add, I would like to maybe make a couple acknowledgments here. We have with us today Director Russ LaFleur from City of Torrance. Thank you, Director, for being with us today. We also have Jackie Bacharach, our CEO of South Bay City's Council of Governments. So we appreciate both of you joining us today. So thank you for your participation in our meeting today. So with that said, do we have any other questions or maybe even comments from anyone here in the caucus? Okay, so seeing no additional feedback or comments, we'll hand it back to you, Shanti and Shane, to maybe introduce our next topic.
I'd just
Okay,
like to
thank
say thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about these issues.
Thank you so much, Shanti. Really appreciate your giving this presentation today.
Thank you, Shanti. Yeah, next, President Deere, we have for you Dimitri Polisos, and Dimitri's going to give us an update on the water shortage emergency condition.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Shane. I think I'm sharing correctly. My screen just went blank, but I got it all back. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to pre-apologize for the messaging that I'm going to provide you all here because it's a continued bad news. But I'm glad you all had a chance to hear the conditions on the Colorado River, or at least what might be coming in the near future, because a lot of the actions that we're taking on the state side and some of the solutions that we're finding to get through this year depend heavily on having a full aqueduct. So we have that luxury this year, and that's certainly going to help us get through this year. But that may not be the case in the near future, as Shanti was saying. So it's good to see that or have that perspective. So what I'm going to focus on is our water shortage emergency condition that our board declared back in April. And unfortunately, the conditions are still at play. See here. So to give you perspective, I'll give you the region-wide supply-demand balance. And so our Colorado River supplies and our State Water Project supplies add up to just over 1 million acre-feet. Our current demand forecast is 1.82 million acre-feet. So you can see there's quite a bit of a gap, a supply-demand gap, roughly 815,000 acre-feet. Now, the majority of that gap can be satisfied with the available storage that we have and the storage that is accessible to the service area. There is, however, that 143,000 acre-feet shown here that we are not able to satisfy at this point in time. And that's what, of course, led to the recommendation from Metropolitan staff and the declaration by our board to go ahead and declare this shortage emergency. And again, this pertains specifically to the State Water Project dependent area. And we put some bubbles here and kind of loosely shown where that area is because it does change. It does fluctuate depending on conditions, on access to certain supplies and what have you, and the ability of member agencies to divert or move or tap into Colorado River supplies instead of State Water Project supplies. So there has been movement in that. There has been a shrinking of the State Water Project dependent area, and that was part of the goal of this, is to reduce the size of that area. So unfortunately, as I was mentioning, the water shortage emergency continues to exist for that population within the currently identified State Water Project dependent area. And so the emergency water conservation program that was approved by the board, the purpose for that program is to reduce demands, again, in the State Water Project dependent area shrink that area and thereby preserving the remaining supplies that we do have, the State Water Project supplies that we do have. So the program started a few days ago. We were actually at the first week of the program, and you all will see the first report. This is kind of a sneak peek before we present this to our board next week. And so you'll be the first to see how we're doing so far, just 1 week in. And we're constantly working with the member agencies, the State Water Project dependent area member agencies on a regular basis. And the reporting that we're doing is going to help us decide whether or not we are on target or whether or not we need to go into deeper restrictions. We'll get to that in a second here. But just a little bit about the program. There are two options for the member agencies to reach compliance. And so there are two paths. The first path is to go ahead and enforce a 1 day a week outdoor watering restriction. Now, we feel that if the area within the State Water Project dependent area go to a 1 day a week, that we would be able to reduce demands to the levels we need them to in order to get through the year. But we also recognize that one size does not fit all, and every agency has their unique challenges and opportunities. And we did not want to be too prescriptive on the restrictions. So if an agency wanted to do something different, maybe a 2 day a week, maybe different limits on the timing per outdoor watering stations, that would be fine. But they would be subject to volumetric limits. And we would be enforcing those limits on a monthly basis. So you would need to live within those volumetric limits. And if you did not, there would be a financial penalty. And then we would be tracking this on a monthly basis. But again, this choice gives the agencies the ability to tailor their response given their unique conditions. And so a little bit about the volumetric limits and how those were developed. So at the time that we did go approve the emergency conservation program, this is the information that we knew. We had demands or water usage through the first 3 months of the year. We had a projection of demands for the remaining part of the year. And then we had an identified amount of supplies available to satisfy the demands, again, in the State Water Project dependent area. And that's what we're looking at here. And as I mentioned, we did not have enough supplies to meet that projected demand. And so what you see here in red is that same gap I showed you earlier, but this is showing it on a monthly basis. So based on this, we set our volumetric limits based on what amount of remaining supplies we had. And that is actually comprised of two components. One is the physical water that Metropolitan had that is accessible to this area, and the human health and safety water that we secured from the Department of Water Resources. And that's what's shown in the lighter blue. And so we then spread that amount of water across the State Water Project dependent area member agencies to develop their volumetric limits. And so this table here shows us the agencies within the State Water Project dependent area and the agencies that are expected to take State Water Project water. Now, you'll see West Basin is on this list. Initially, there was thought that the district was within the State Water Project dependent area. That turns out to not be the case, and West Basin will not be taking or is not expecting to take State Water Project supplies. So they're certainly doing your part to help with this. But nonetheless, we did secure human health and safety water out of an abundance of caution. So we do have those supplies, and not using them is absolutely fine. That just helps us, again, get through the rest of the year for the other agencies. And so the box or the table at the top here, the 6 agencies that are listed up there are agencies that are expected to take State Water Project supplies. We are working with them, obviously, to reduce their use, hence the emergency program. And there's some continued work in taking some of these agencies completely off of the State Water Project, like the Upper St. Gabriel Valley. Their depending on the quagga plans, their ability to take Colorado River water into their spreading basins, they need an approved quagga plan. We're working with them to get that approval from the county and other folks. If we're successful, we'll be able to take them completely off of the State Water Project, and that will help, of course, get us through the year. All right, so a little bit more about the program, the Emergency Water Conservation Program, with respect to the penalties and how those are going to be enforced. So for those agencies that are going down the first path, this is the path where they're going to 1 day a week outdoor watering. No penalties would be assessed if the following information or documentation is provided to us, and that is to adopt a resolution or an ordinance showing that you are doing 1 day a week outdoor watering restriction, and also to submit an enforcement plan to show us how you will be enforcing that ordinance. And so the agencies have submitted, and I'll get into a little bit later here which agencies have selected, but we're reviewing that documentation as we speak. For those agencies under Path 2, the agencies that have decided to do something different than 1 day a week, again, as I mentioned earlier, they would be subject to those volumetric limits, and we would be tracking that, and a penalty would be assessed on a monthly basis if they exceed their monthly limit. There is an appeals process, and we set this up in order to give agencies a process to be able to, work through any accruals or any penalties that were assessed. And so we will be reevaluating, regardless of any requests from the member agencies, we will reevaluate where we are at the end of the year. And as long as an agency in total stays within their total limit, then we would credit back any penalties received during the year. But assessing these penalties on a monthly basis, we felt, and it was agreed upon with the member agencies, would be the incentive to help keep us on target with the volumetric limits that we have. So, a little bit about what has happened to date. We did, per the requirements of the Emergency Conservation Program that the board approved, we came out with a detailed handbook that further explains the program. So we did provide that to the member agencies. We also have been working with them on what these monitoring reports will look like. I'm going to provide an example here in a few minutes here, but we worked with the member agencies on what kind of information would be helpful for them in tracking their water use. So we did that, and the first report will be transmitted later today. You're going to get a sneak peek of that, but it captures the first week, and these reports will be weekly and sent out to the affected State Water Project dependent area member agencies. So the table here shows the Path 1 and Path 2 agencies. Caucus, Las Virgenes, and Three Valleys have all decided to go with Path 1, so enacting the 1 day a week watering. Path 2 agencies are on the volumetric. They include the City of Los Angeles, Inland Empire Utilities Agency, and Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. So we are reviewing the documentation that the Path 1 agencies, we are going to ensure that we're going to work with them if there's any discrepancies or if they're not in full compliance. We're trying to honor as much as possible which path they want to take, but of course we need to do this in accordance with the guidelines in the program. All right, let's talk about a little bit about the monitoring, because all of this information is accessible to all. So there are reports that we have online, and those are raw metering data that you can look up yourself if anyone's interested. We can provide the links, and all that daily raw data is what we're using for these more tailored reports that we're going to be sending out on a weekly basis. So the daily raw data is more of a self-help. Anyone can log in and get that information. These weekly reports were tailor made for the member agencies, with coordinating with them on what they wanted to look, what those reports they wanted to see on those reports. So basically there's two types. There's a monthly snapshot and there's the entire period, the June through December tracking. And so the basic purpose is to track agencies' water use against their volumetric limits. And so we've done this on a individual agency basis and also rolled them all up. And so what I'm going to share with you today is a monthly snapshot for all the agencies. And that's what you're seeing here on this graphic. There's a lot of information here, but it's useful information in tracking where we are. So overall, as of today, 7 days in, we are on target. In fact, we're running slightly below. So the agencies, the state water project dependent agencies, are using less water overall, collectively, than where our targets are. So what you're seeing here, maybe I can point to it. That projection that I showed you in an earlier graphic where I said back in April, we had a demand projection that we knew we could not meet. Well, that's reflected in this orange line here. So that was a line that we wanted to avoid. We wanted to make sure our water use was less than that. And so the volumetric limit for all of the agencies for the month of June, that's what we're looking at here, is 34,710 acre feet. And so we provide this guidance line just as a daily tracker to see how we're doing. And the actuals, which are these blue bars, are showing that indeed we are running slightly below that volumetric limit guidance line. And that's a good thing. We want to see that continue throughout this process. We want to see those blue bars as low as possible. And the box in the little table here gives us a quick snapshot of performance measures. So we're currently running 487 acre feet below the target, and that's about 6%. Cumulative use is at that rate here, 7,612 acre feet. And so that means remaining for this month, we have 27,000 or so acre feet before we hit that limit. And so the rates there are giving you a sense of, to date, we're performing or we're running at about just over 1,087 acre feet per day. And we have room, one way to look at it, to go up to a 1,178 for the remainder of this month. But that doesn't mean we should, or we should do that. We should be as low as we can. But good news, at least for the first 7 days, we are running below the volumetric limit. But we have much more time to go, so we'll continue to track this. And as a little bit about the decision points, we will be providing these weekly reports, and that's going to feed into our decision making, whether or not our recommendation to our general manager, whether or not we should go to deeper restrictions. I'll give you a sense of the timing of that. We would be reporting out in the August timeframe if it is decided to go to a deeper restriction. So on September 1st, per the program, that would be the earliest we could go to a 0-day outdoor watering restriction. And that again would be for those Path 1 agencies. If that's the case, and again, this is only if it's needed. And if it's deemed necessary to do that. And so we need to provide a 30-day notice to give folks a heads up, so that notice would occur in August. If things continue to worsen, the drought conditions, and if we're not seeing the water savings that we need to see, then we could go to taking all of the agencies onto the volumetric limits. So holding all the agencies to their volumetric limits. That would be, we would signal that if deemed that would be necessary, we would signal that in the November timeframe, and that action would not take place any earlier than the December timeframe. One thing to keep in mind, regardless on the path you're on, we're tracking all of the agencies to the volumetric limits. So even if you are an agency that is doing 1 day a week outdoor watering, we're still going to be tracking you towards the volumetric limit. Because again, this is information that's going to help us in determining whether or not we're going to need to go into a deeper restriction. All right, so those reports, water use, tracking against volumetric limits is one key bit of information that we will be using to inform the decision or the recommendation to go to a deeper restriction. We're also going to look at the bigger picture. We need to always reevaluate our supplies and demands. What we had assumed back in April with respect to supplies and the remaining supplies we had, which we distributed to create those volumetric limits, we need to make sure that those assumptions are accurate. Things change over time. Assumptions on our transfer supplies, for example, which made up part of that remaining supply, has changed. And so we need to reevaluate exactly where we stand and figure out where we will end. So that'll be another bit of information. The other piece is other factors such as shutdowns and other system limitations. So speaking to what Greg mentioned earlier with the West Basins going to these their own outdoor restrictions, 2 days, I believe I heard. That's going to be helpful because there are some shutdowns in the very near future here that will, unfortunately, reduce our ability to bring in the Colorado River water for a short duration of time. And so what we're going to be asking for likely during that shutdown is for all those agencies, many of the agencies that are outside of the State Water Project dependent area, West Basin included, to go into some restrictive outdoor water use for that duration. So getting a head start on that is going to be helpful. But there are other things that could happen that we're not aware of, unplanned shutdowns. So and that might limit, again, our ability to bring in that Colorado River supply, which is helping us get through this year. So always going to be updating this and providing reports out, certainly to our board. With respect to next steps, we are looking at the documentation we received to verify that those agencies that want Path 1, that they are compliant. We will continue to transmit these weekly reports, and the coordination continues, and these kind of opportunities here to talk to you all helps provide those updates and give you a sense of where we are in the whole process. So with that, I think that gets the end here. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dimitri, for that presentation. That was peppered with, your bad news was peppered with good news. In particular, the performance is looking good in this first few days of the new program. And hopefully our agencies will continue to keep pace in that regard. And really good tools to help provide the visibility that we need to know how we're performing. So that's fantastic. Just kind of wondering, I know you don't need more on your plate, but would those same type of reports be available to any agency who might be interested?
Oh, absolutely. So what we're going to do is post these reports on our member agency website. So you will all have access to those. We will be updating them weekly. So as soon as we send these out we're sending these specifically to the State Water Project dependent area folks, but everyone will have access to it on the member agency manager website.
I guess maybe let me clarify, if we were interested in our own performance, even though we are not within.
Yeah, we can look into doing that as well. In fact, for you guys at West Basin, I think we're actually geared up and ready. We are tracking your water use. So I think we can hit the ground running on that one and provide that information, sure.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I know you are probably in close contact with our water policy and legislation team under EJ Caldwell's leadership. So if you could, I appreciate adding that one to-do item on your very full plate. Thank you for that. Looks like Anatol has his hand raised. So please, Anatol.
Thank you, Greg. Dimitri, as always, thank you for a great presentation. I wanted to direct a general question to Metropolitan about an element here that in the timeline that you gave of arguably if situations continue to worsen, where that timeline can go. For us as municipal retailers, I believe that cities then also have their housing plans that are elements of critical importance to them, especially given the state housing crisis. And I wanted to urge Metropolitan to stay in contact with SCAG because an emerging comment that we're starting to receive is this element that therefore housing plans and the state's housing needs are in error. Because how could you justify the need for additional housing to be permitted and allowed when it's obvious that there's not enough water? I don't agree with that statement. I don't agree with that perspective.
Okay,
However, I do want to alert, as the regional agency, I do want to alert Metropolitan that many of your retail agencies at the most frontline level may soon be dealing with that issue as the months go by. This contrast of, I know I want to believe some element about housing, and yet I have this other element about water use that seems to feed a particular perspective. So I don't know to what you guys will see it at the regional level, but I'm already starting to see it at the municipal level.
Well, I can tell you, I'm already seeing it as I'm going around making these presentations. It's a common theme that comes up from the public, general public, is how can you do this when you're telling us we're running out of water? So, and I agree with your perspective on that. It's a little more nuanced than that, but yeah, I'm starting to see it for sure.
Thank you for the heads up, Anatole.
Okay, do we have anyone else who would like to perhaps raise a question or maybe add a few comments or remarks?
I can't find my raising my hand.
Hey, but please, Jackie, go forward. Thank you so much for chiming in.
Okay, I don't think that this is a small issue. The fact that people are being asked to have a lot of housing in their community and they're asked to restrict their water. And agencies like ours would love to be able to bring the response to that to our members and to give cities fact sheets. And if there's something that is out there that explains how these two apparently contradictory things make sense. I have gotten blowback from an LA Times article that said we can all grow with the drought. We just have to conserve. Well, people say, you know, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If we forget water our plants, then how does that allow us to grow? So I think this is a very serious thing that we really need to take head on. And if there's any kinds of information that our agency can help disseminate or to understand and help our cities understand, I think that would be great.
I think that's fantastic, Jackie, for making that offer. I'm certainly interested in perhaps having some of the materials that you're offering. So I know we have a planned lunch discussion coming up soon, but I'd love to maybe get access to those materials.
I'm not saying I have the materials. I'm saying that I think we need together to generate those materials because they aren't out there and it is confusing.
Okay, very good. Perhaps there's an opportunity to collaborate, and maybe Anatole could be one of our collaborators in that effort. Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Or Anatole, your hand is up. Okay, you would like to make another comment. Please do.
Yeah, just a separate comment. I know that I think Dimitri, I was multitasking, so I apologize. I didn't capture all of the communication you were doing. I think that you did reference, though, that in the August timeframe, there's going to be emergency repairs that's going to trigger for, I think it's going to trigger for Central Pool, kind of like an awareness. So I'm struggling with what to term it, and that's perhaps the nature of my comment and question here, is that at some point I'll be looking for Metropolitan to give me some guidance as to what messaging we need to put out, because it will be at a very critical time frame in which a lot of things may be hitting the newspapers and just the airwaves at that time. And then I know that you need a response from us, and we're happy to do that as a member agency. We'll need some guidance as to what the messages need to be.
Yeah. I didn't know if you wanted me to respond or my thoughts on that, or Shane, I see your hand up, but I didn't want to.
Yeah, no, I'll chime in. Anatole, we'll be working very closely with all the member agencies on the messaging, and Dimitri teed this up well. Excuse me, Shanti started us with some bad news. Dimitri expanded on this, and I'll I'll put this in the column of Murphy is alive and well, Murphy's Law. On Monday, the E&O committee will receive a report from Brent Yamasaki and John Bednarski, WSO and engineering group managers, respectively. There are two pipelines that leave Lake Matthews, which is the terminal reservoir for the Colorado River, the upper feeder, which feeds the Weymouth treatment plant and the central pool, and the lower feeder, which feeds the Deemer plant in Yorba Linda and also the central pool. We have a leak on the upper feeder, and we're under a flow restriction right now of 525 CFS. We need to be able to get that pipe back up to about 700 CFS to make everything work here. And that leak is in the worst possible location. It's on the Santa Ana River Bridge. The upper feeder is a falling grade or non-pressurized pipeline, except for this point, where it crosses the Santa Ana River, comes out of the grade, goes across the river on basically like a trestle railroad bridge. And there's a bellows coupling in the middle that is designed to take up the thermal expansion and contraction of that pipe that happens during the day as it heats up and cools down. That bellows coupling has cracked. It's stable right now, and we're doing okay. We're manufacturing a sleeve coupling to replace that with, but this is a significant shutdown. This is a shutdown of 10 to 14 days. We're targeting late August, early September. So as we gear up for that and we make sure we've got the schedule down, we'll be coordinating very closely with everyone on messaging and getting your input and thoughts on how best to do that. We will be using more state water project supplies to get through this, and we'll be pulling that water into the central pool through the Jensen plant and running it through the Venice pressure control structure power plant there to make up that difference. It's going to be about an additional 20 to 30,000 acre feet, depending on how this plays out, how long it takes to do this work. And we're working closely with DWR to make sure that seeking that additional volume from them as additional health and safety water doesn't impact any of the existing allotment for the dependent areas that we've already secured. So that's where we're at right now. Anatole, I know you know that area well. Couldn't have a leak in the worst place right now. That's all, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for those remarks, Shane. Do we have anyone else who would like to chime in with a question or a comment?
This is Director Gray. Can you hear me?
Hi, Director Gray.
Hi, thank you. The call has been dropping a lot, I guess, because the president or someone has been down. But thank you for the opportunity to just comment. I just wanted to thank Metropolitan staff for the report this morning. Thank you, Shanti, for bringing to light the issue on the Colorado River. It just kind of highlights the importance of the drought and the fact that we all are collaborating on trying to find solutions to it. So I appreciate that, and thank you, Dimitri, for your report this morning. I just wanted to offer those comments, and I think Jackie chimed in and offered support for messaging, and I appreciate that, and anyone else who part of the discussion. And thank you, Greg, for your comments this morning. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Gray. Okay, so with that, we're right about time for the meeting today. I'd love to continue the conversation, but I do want to respect everyone's time, and maybe it'll feel great to get out early rather than to end up late. I'd love to talk about groundwater production and how that might help the situation if we were to shift to more locally sourced water. But, in the interest of everyone's time, I won't take us there.
Great.
So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, could I just add one more comment statement to my comment, Chair? The Chair.
Absolutely, please do.
President. Yeah, I wanted to also thank Shane this morning because I know he's in charge of so much of the organization, and thank him for his reports this morning on some of the other issues that we're facing. So thank you, Shane, for being on the line. I don't know if anyone else from Metropolitan, but I did hear Shane this morning. So thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Okay, so with that stated, I do also add my thank you and appreciation to the Met team for being with us today and providing these very sobering reports. And thank you, Anatole and Jackie, for also adding to the conversation. And so with that, we will turn it back over to President Deere.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for participating, and I want to adjourn the meeting if there's no further business. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.